I wasn't supposed to notice the lights. In a building that size, little things staying on overnight wasn't unusual. Cleaning crews forgot switches. Motion timers glitched. Old wiring did what old wiring always does. That's what I told myself the first few nights, because according to the building schedule, no one was supposed to be on the 4th floor after midnight. Not cleaning staff, not late employees, no one. But every time I checked the camera feed, the lights were already on. Not flickering, not warming up, not triggering while I watched, just on. Steady, patient, like they had been waiting there longer than I had. At the time, I made the mistake most night guards make. I ignored it, and the building let me ignore it for a while. Night shift security is mostly about pattern recognition. People think it's about watching screens. It isn't. It's about learning the building well enough that even small changes feel wrong. After about 3 weeks at the corporate complex, I knew the rhythm by heart. Badge check at 10 p.m., camera sweep every 30 minutes, walking patrol on the hour. The property itself was quiet in that artificial corporate way. Too clean, too evenly lit, too carefully maintained. During the day, it probably felt efficient. At night, it felt staged, like a place pretending to be occupied. The kind of quiet where small sounds travel too far. The kind of quiet where you start noticing things you probably shouldn't. That's when the 4th floor started standing out, not because anything dramatic happened, but because something subtle stopped matching the pattern. And once you notice that, it's hard to unnotice it. The first time I physically went up there, it was 12:42 a.m. I remember the exact time because I hesitated before hitting the elevator button. Not fear, not yet. Just that mild professional annoyance when something small interrupts an otherwise smooth shift. The elevator ride up was slow, slower than usual. I told myself I was imagining that part. When the doors opened, the hallway lights were already fully on. Bright, even, clinical. The 4th floor always had that faint overnight office smell, paper dust, stale air, and the ghost of burnt coffee from earlier in the day. Everything looked perfectly in place. Chairs tucked in, doors closed, monitors asleep. And yet, the space felt recently occupied. Not messy, not disturbed, just recently used. Like walking into a room where someone had been sitting quietly a moment ago and stepped out just before you arrived. That feeling stayed with me longer than I liked. If you've never worked overnight in an office building, there's something important to understand. At night, the building breathes differently. Air vents cycle louder. Refrigeration units click on and off in long, uneven intervals. Fluorescent lights give off a faint electrical hum you stop hearing during the day. But that night, on the 4th floor, something else felt off. The air felt slightly warmer near the conference wing. Not by much. Just enough that I noticed when I stepped past the glass wall. I stopped walking, stood there for maybe 5 seconds, listening. Nothing. No footsteps. No doors, no movement. Still, I checked the conference room. Empty. Completely empty. But the light was already on. Over the next week, I started paying closer attention. Not officially, just watching. The pattern slowly became harder to ignore. The lights on the 4th floor never turned on while I was looking at the cameras. Never. They were either already on or already off. Like I kept missing the exact moment of change. At first, I blamed camera refresh lag, then motion sensor delay, then building automation, but the timestamps didn't quite line up because every morning at exactly 6:02 a.m., the lights turned off. Always the same second, always before the first employee badge in around 6:08. That 6-minute gap started bothering me more than anything else because it felt intentional, not mechanical. Intentional. One night, around 2:30 a.m., I finally did what I probably should have done earlier. I pulled the badge access logs. Full report. Previous 2 weeks. 4th floor only. I expected to find something simple. Cleaning crew mistake. After hours manager. Maintenance visit. Instead, the logs were clean. Perfectly clean. No entries after 6:14 p.m. No exits after. No ghost swipes. Nothing. According to the system, no one had been on that floor overnight. Not once. And that's when the situation stopped being mildly annoying and started being quietly wrong. The moment things truly changed happened on a Tuesday. I remember because Tuesdays were always slower. Fewer late workers, less daytime spillover, deeper silence by midnight. At 1:58 a.m., during a routine camera sweep, I saw the fourth floor lights were on again. Same section, conference wing. But this time, something else caught my eye. One of the motion sensors in the hallway had triggered, just once, a brief red indicator flash in the system panel. And then, nothing. No second trigger, no follow-up movement, just a single activation, like something had moved exactly one time and then stopped completely. I sat there staring at the monitor longer than I want to admit, because deep down, something about that pattern felt familiar in a way I couldn't explain. Protocol said verify, so I went back up. Elevator, fourth floor, same slow doors, same bright hallway. But the moment I stepped out this time, the air felt different. Not warmer, not colder, just occupied. That's the only word that fits. Occupied in the way an empty room sometimes isn't really empty. I walked slower this time, much slower, every office still empty, every chair still pushed in, every monitor still asleep. But when I reached the conference room glass, I stopped because the light inside flickered once, very softly, like it had just finished adjusting. Nothing moved in that room, nothing obvious anyway, but the conference table chairs weren't perfectly aligned anymore. Not messy, not overturned, just slightly off. Like someone had very carefully stood up from one of them and pushed it back almost exactly into place. Almost. I stood there longer than I should have, listening again, waiting for some normal explanation to present itself. None did. After that night, I stopped doing full walk-ups unless absolutely required. I watched from the cameras more, listened more, paid attention to smaller things, and the pattern continued. Lights on after midnight, lights off at 6:02. Never caught in the act. Always just outside the moment of change, like the building wasn't malfunctioning, like it was timing itself. My last week there, something happened I've never been able to fully explain. Around 2:11 a.m., the fourth floor lights came on again, but this time, the motion sensor triggered first. Clear as day, one clean activation. Then the lights followed, like something inside had moved after standing perfectly still for a very long time. I never went back up there again. Transferred buildings 2 weeks later, new property, new system, new routines. But every now and then, late at night, when automatic lights turn on near me in empty buildings, I still get the uncomfortable feeling that nothing in that office complex ever malfunctioned. It didn't glitch. It didn't misfire. It didn't react. It learned the schedule by watching us. The elevator in our building had a small delay. Nothing serious, just enough that you'd notice it if you rode it every night like I did. At first, I thought it was mechanical, old system, slow relay, normal wear. But after a few weeks on night shift, I started noticing something that didn't fit any mechanical pattern. The elevator would sometimes stop on floors no one had requested, and the doors would open, like someone was already waiting. This was a different job from my last post. Older building, downtown, 15 floors, most of them empty after business hours. Law offices, insurance suites, a few consulting firms that liked to pretend they worked late, but never actually did. By midnight, the place went dead quiet. Too quiet, honestly. The kind of quiet where the elevator cables sounded louder than they should, where every floor felt like it was holding its breath. Night security there was mostly routine, camera sweeps, lobby checks, elevator monitoring. That last part mattered more than people realize, because in older buildings, elevators tell you things. The first time it happened, I almost ignored it. 3:18 a.m. I remember the time because I had just poured myself bad coffee from the lobby machine and was halfway back to the security desk. The elevator indicator panel flicked. Floor 7. The car stopped. Doors opened, paused, closed. At the time, I assumed a delayed call. Maybe someone pressed the button earlier. Maybe the system lagged. Nothing unusual, except when I checked the elevator log later. There was no button press recorded. Our system tracked everything. Cabin buttons, hall calls, door holds, maintenance overrides. Every input left a timestamp. So I pulled the log again. 3:18:07. Elevator arrived. Floor 7, 3:18:10. Doors open 3:18:13. Doors closed. No request. No call. No error flag. According to the system, the elevator had simply decided to stop there. On its own. I didn't like that. But I told myself what every night guard tells themselves when something small doesn't make sense. Probably just a glitch. 2 nights later, same thing, different time, 3:04 a.m., floor 7 again. Doors open, 3-second pause, doors close. That's when I started paying real attention because machines repeat mistakes, but they usually repeat them wrong. This wasn't wrong. This was consistent. Too consistent. If you've never studied elevator behavior at night, there's something subtle you should know. When elevator doors open for an empty floor, the pause is usually short, functional, efficient. But when someone is expected to enter, the system allows slightly more time, just enough for a person to step in comfortably. The pause I was seeing was the second kind. Every time, 3 seconds, patient, waiting. So I pulled the elevator camera footage, and that's when the first real chill hit me, because visually, nothing was there. Every time the doors opened on floor 7, the hallway was empty. Completely empty, no movement, no shadows crossing, no late worker rushing in, just empty carpet and dim hallway lights. But the elevator car itself shifted, very slightly. You only notice it if you've ridden elevators for years. That subtle weight adjustment, that tiny suspension correction, the kind that happens when someone steps inside. I spend the next few shifts trying to explain it away. Weight sensors miscalibrated, cable tension, old hydraulics. But the pattern kept tightening. Always after 3 a.m., always floor 7, always the same pause, always the same subtle cabin shift. Like someone invisible had very consistent timing. That's when I made my first mistake. I decided to test it. I waited inside the elevator, 2:52 a.m., riding between floors, letting the car idle, watching the panel, trying to look casual even though no one was there to see me. 2:57 a.m., nothing. 3:01 a.m., still nothing. 3:04 a.m., the elevator jerked gently, not a malfunction jerk, a selection jerk. The floor indicator changed. Floor 7. I hadn't touched the panel. The ride to floor 7 felt longer than usual, probably wasn't. But when you're standing alone in a quiet elevator at 3 a.m., small things stretch. The motor hummed steadily. Cables whispered above the ceiling panel. The digital display ticked upward, 1 floor at a time. 4, 5, 6. And right before we reached 7, the car made that tiny weight adjustment again, like someone had just shifted their stance beside me. I didn't turn my head. I don't know why. Instinct, maybe. The doors slid open slowly. Floor 7 hallway, empty, silent, exactly like every camera review. And that's when I realized something that made my stomach drop. The elevator wasn't stopping for someone on the floor. It was stopping after someone had already gotten inside. I stepped out, slowly, very slowly. And from the hallway, I watched the empty elevator car make room. Maintenance checked the system the next week. Full diagnostic. Weight sensors normal, call logs normal, motor normal, everything functioning within expected parameters. I transferred buildings 2 weeks later. Different post, different elevators, new routines. But even now, when I step into elevators late at night, I never stand in the center anymore. I always leave space beside me, just in case something else is still riding up to floor 7. Security cameras glitch all the time. Anyone who's worked overnight monitoring knows that. Static, frame skips, compression blur when the network stutters. You get used to it. You learn which cameras lag, which ones freeze for half a second, which feeds need a reboot once a week. What you don't get used to is when the glitches only happen while you're not looking. The security office sat in the back corner of the building. No windows, no natural light, just a long wall of monitors and the constant low hum of equipment racks that never fully powered down. Night shift there was usually calm, almost too calm. Most of the building emptied by 9:30 p.m. By midnight, it felt less like monitoring a workplace and more like watching a museum after closing. Still, predictable, comfortably predictable, until camera 6 started behaving strangely. The first time I noticed it, I wasn't even fully paying attention. It was just after 1:40 a.m. I was halfway through writing a routine incident log when something soft ticked in the monitor wall. That faint digital flick you hear when footage buffers. I looked up. Everything appeared normal, but something in my peripheral vision told me the timestamp had changed. I leaned closer. Camera 6. Hallway outside the storage wing. The time had jumped forward 2 seconds, maybe 3. At first, I assumed normal network lag. It happens, so I logged nothing and moved on. Over the next few nights, it happened again. Always camera 6, always small, 2 seconds, 3 at most. Never enough to trigger the system alert. Never enough to look dramatic. Just enough to bother someone who watched screens for a living. And one detail slowly started to crawl under my skin. It never skipped while I was looking directly at it. So, I tested it. Around 2:15 a.m., I pulled my chair directly in front of camera 6 and stared at it. 5 minutes, nothing. 10 minutes, perfect feed. No flicker, no skip, no timestamp jump. Eventually, I leaned back, slightly annoyed at myself for wasting time on what was probably cheap hardware, and the moment I looked down at my report, tick. I snapped my eyes back up. Timestamp had jumped again. At that point, I still stayed rational. Network jitter, encoding delay. Maybe the recording server was under load. I even ran diagnostics. Bandwidth looked normal. Packet loss minimal. No obvious faults, but the behavior continued. Night after night. Camera 6 would drop tiny pieces of time, only when my eyes weren't on it. That's when I made the decision that changed the tone of everything. I pulled archived footage, previous week. Camera 6, frame by frame. At first, it looked like simple time skips, until I slowed it down, because the missing seconds weren't empty. They weren't corrupted. They were overwritten, cleanly, deliberately, like the system had recorded something, and then quietly removed it. After that, the room started feeling different at night. Same monitors, same hum, same stale recycled air, but the quiet felt heavier, like the building wasn't just empty anymore, like something in the system had started noticing that I was noticing it. Camera 6 kept behaving the same way. Small skips, only when I looked away. Patient, consistent, intentional. Around 3:50 a.m. one night, I tried something I'm still not proud of. Instead of watching camera 6 directly, I watched it through the reflection in my dark monitor. Peripheral vision only. Not a full look, just enough to see motion if something changed. For a long time, nothing happened. Then at exactly 4:12 a.m., the timestamp flicked, and in that brief, reflected moment, I saw something standing in the hallway. Not clearly, not long enough for details, just a shape. Human height, perfectly still, standing exactly where the footage usually skipped. The moment I turned my head to look directly, the feed was clean again. Empty hallway, no movement. Timestamp normal, like nothing had ever been there. But my hands were already cold on the desk, because by then, I understood the pattern. Whatever was causing the skips wasn't random. It wasn't mechanical, and it definitely wasn't struggling to appear on camera. If anything, it was being careful. Careful about timing, careful about visibility, careful about when I was looking directly and when I wasn't. Like it didn't need the cameras to fail, it only needed me to look away. The official report later said the system was replaced. Hardware fault, routine upgrade, nothing unusual, that's what the paperwork says. But sometimes, late at night, when I'm alone in quiet rooms, working in front of screens, I still catch myself doing something I never used to do. Every few minutes, without thinking, I glance away. Just briefly, just long enough to create a small blind moment. And every time I do, I get that same quiet feeling I had in the monitor room. Like somewhere, something is still perfectly comfortable, standing very still in the exact moment I'm not looking. The phone at the security desk wasn't supposed to ring at night, not after midnight. During the day, sure, deliveries, maintenance, the occasional confused visitor who couldn't find the right entrance. But overnight, nothing. Weeks could pass without that line making a sound. That's why the first time it rang at 2:13 a.m., I picked it up immediately and heard nothing. This was during my third security job, mid-sized medical office building, 4 floors, mostly empty after 10 p.m. Night shift, there was quiet in a different way than corporate buildings, less polished, more hollow. The security desk sat in the main lobby facing the glass entrance doors. Behind me, the monitor wall. To my right, the desk phone. Old model, hard plastic handset. No caller ID screen. Just a small red indicator light when the line was active. Simple, reliable, predictable, until it wasn't. The first call came at exactly 2:13 a.m. I remember because I had just checked the parking lot cameras. The phone rang once, sharp, loud in the empty lobby. I picked up on the second ring. Security. Silence. Not static. Not breathing. Just open line silence. After about 5 seconds, the line clicked dead. I stared at the handset for a moment, then logged it as a wrong number. That was mistake number 1. It happened again 2 nights later. Same time, 2:13 a.m. One ring. Pause. Second ring. I picked up slower this time. Security desk. Silence again. But this time, something felt different. You know how sometimes on an open phone line, you can hear the faint room tone from the other end? Air movement, electrical hum, distant movement. This line had none of that. It sounded too clean, like the call wasn't coming from another room, or even another phone. After the third call that week, I checked the internal extension logs. Every phone in the building had an ID. Every outgoing internal call left a trace. But at 2:13 a.m. on all 3 nights, there was no record of an incoming call. According to the system, the phone had never rung. I didn't like that. Not at all. I told myself it was probably a logging delay. Old system, clock drift, cheap infrastructure, but the pattern kept tightening. Every few nights, always 2:13 a.m., always 2 rings, always silence on pickup. And then one night, something changed. It was subtle, easy to miss. When I picked up that night, the line wasn't completely silent anymore. For the first few seconds, there was nothing. Then, very faint, very far away, a soft shift of sound, like fabric moving. I froze with the handset against my ear, listening, waiting. Nothing else followed, but my hand was already gripping the receiver tighter than it should have been. That's when I started doing something I hadn't needed to do before. Every time the phone rang, I checked the cameras immediately. Lobby or empty. Hallways, empty. Parking lot, empty. But one night, camera 3 flickered just for a frame. The hallway outside the security office, I rewound it twice, nothing visible, but the timestamp had skipped forward 2 seconds. The night I finally understood what was happening started exactly the same, 2:13 a.m. The phone rang. Once, twice. I picked up slowly. Security. Silence. Then, very faint. Very close this time. A soft movement, not from the phone, from behind me. I didn't spin around, not immediately. Something in my gut told me to move slowly. Very slowly. I lowered the handset just enough to keep the line open and turned my chair a few degrees. The lobby behind me was still empty. Glass doors. Dark parking lot beyond. Nothing moving, but the phone line was still open. That's when the thought hit me. Slow. Heavy. Impossible to ignore once it arrived. The calls weren't coming from somewhere else in the building. They weren't coming from outside. And they definitely weren't wrong numbers, because the timing was too perfect, too patient, too consistent, like something wasn't trying to reach the desk. It was checking whether I would answer. The official system audit later showed no faults, no phantom calls, no line activity at those times. Everything functioning normally. I transferred out a month later. Different building, different desk, different phone. But sometimes, late at night, when a room is very quiet and I'm sitting with my back to open space, I still get the uncomfortable urge to let the phone ring one more time before I answer, just to be sure whatever was listening is still on the other end.